Hi, my name's Michaelbeale and I'm the first team coach at Rangers Football Club. I'm here to answer the questions for Ask the Coach. I was a young player at Charlton and I stopped playing at 21, and I had probably a period of 6 or 8 months where I was unsure what to do. And I went on a few trials. I went across to Holland, a few clubs in England. I also went across to America. And I had a little bit of money left over from playing. And I decided to buy a franchise of Brazilian soccer schools, which was a way of training them around futsal. The guy Simon Clifford was behind the film Bend It Like Beckham and Jimmy Grimble, and it was a very interesting way of coaching football. It was with a small ball that didn't really bounce. It was very skill based, and that really sat well with me and how I like to play the game and how I wanted to teach it. So it started in a church hall. I paid £32 to rent the church hall, and it was £4 a kid, and only 3 children turned up. So it wasn't the best business plan. But about 6-8 months later, that led to an interview with Chelsea, and I went in to start out putting out cones for the 6 to 8s program, quickly progressed to work in the academy in the various age groups, and probably I started at Chelsea maybe in March 2003 and went full-time in the summer of 2007 and stayed there to 2012 as youth development officer, which was overseeing the coaching of our development centre programme for 6 to 8 year olds. Then I managed different age groups up to the under 14s. In 2012, I went to Liverpool to start off with as head of the under 16s team, but to oversee the 16s and 15s programme. That quickly progressed for me to becoming assistant reserve manager and then reserve manager, or under 21s, under 23s. The name changed a lot. And in 2017, I took the opportunity to go to South America to work for Sao Paulo Football Club as assistant manager. I was there for 8 months. I came back to Liverpool again as head of the foundation phase, or head of coaching for sort of the 7 to 11s program. And that led me ultimately to where I am now at first team coach at Rangers Football Club. So over this period of probably 17 years, it's been very varied, my journey. The biggest setback for me, I've not had many setbacks. I've always chose the moment when to move from one club to another or the next job. I've had quite a smooth journey in my coaching, but if I look back at one period that was really disappointing, it was probably my last month in Sao Paulo. I'd given up a lot to go there. It was a fantastic journey that sort of came to the end very quickly. It was my first experience of first team football, and maybe when, you know, a board of directors and a coaching team are not all aligned, and we lost a lot of players that we sold, and it came to an end very quickly, and I resigned and come away, and it was really disappointing. It took me a good few months to get over that period. I started coaching at 21 when I stopped playing, really, or when I went into the semi-professional game. I started the soccer school, as I mentioned, and was working part-time at Chelsea as well. But I was working a number of jobs back then. I did soccer schools, I did women's football, I had a spell coaching at Chelsea Ladies, at Crystal Palace Ladies. I coached the AFC Wimbledon youth team when they were a college programme. I was still playing non-league. I was doing a hell of a lot. I did disability coaching, and that would be my advice to young coaches now, that, you know, as I've progressed, I think what's really important is them hours that I put in perfecting my delivery, how I communicated with players, how I built rapport, how I was very parent friendly. And you get to see a wide range of players, and you get to see the different levels, and all of that comes together as part of your coaching technique. I think one thing I would give advice to young people is you know, your personality when you're coaching football is really important. You know, it's someone's son or daughter that's come into your session, and that's a really important thing, that you give them a fantastic entrance into football, and that you really inspire their love for the game and enhance it. And I would also say pay a close attention to individual development rather than teams, and work with people rather than systems. And I think that will keep you in good stead as you progress through your career. Since moving to the older age group, sort of like the under 18s, 23s and first team, I think it's really important your first contact with a player when you arrive in a club, or when a player arrives to your club, or comes in full time from being a schoolboy. I think you really have to sit them down then and understand them, why they play the game, what their aims are, and really emphasize to them that obviously they're talented, that's why they're there, and you're there to help a bit of focus with them. But the motivation must come from them. It's their dream. They must show real integrity when they're away from you. And obviously from there, you've got to manage their pathway. But it really comes from that first conversation of understanding the player and where he wants to go. That enables you then to go and plan sessions for that player. Now, if you have a group of centre forwards, they all need to work on finishing, and likewise defenders will have certain elements of their game. But I think that's a real personal way. You have to start off. I really do believe that 80% of your coaching is the stuff you do off the pitch, is how the boy or the girl arrives to training, how they feel about their development, how focused they are, and how they feel about you and how you're helping them on their journey. And really, I would advise people to split around. There's certainly no superhuman sessions where there's one coach dominating and leading everything. I think you need a variety of coaches now to get around your group. And that might mean you can get around in units and work more specifically. But I think it's how you fuel and how you affect a young player's mind before they come to training. And when I say young player, I'm late 30s now, so I'm working with young players at a first team level that are 10, 12 years younger than me. And I think that's it. I think you've got to give them this you versus yourself mentality. And I think it starts with, where do you want to go? And then working backwards from there, and you identifying for that player what they might need, them sort of agreeing or meeting in the middle to agree. And then every single day, that's what you do. That's your daily rituals. Whether that's a player goes out before the session and works on something specific, they stay after, whether the sports science team work with them, whether the psychologist works with them, whether the analyst works with them tactically. It's a real collective effort now with young players. My inspiration for that comes from NFL. I study NFL a lot. I think the studying of NFL and the way they manage 50 players with the unit coaches, and that was something I really studied quite a lot. And I try, that's one of those things that I study a lot outside. I'm really interested in that, because if your ultimate aim is to manage an academy or manage a team, or be a first team manager, you're going to have a number of staff around you that are going to help you. So spreading the workload around your staff is really, really important, I feel. It's really interesting. I think the foundation phase is like an experiment phase. And what I would say there is that, the small games, there's not really a position in it if we're doing it right. The 5v5, 6v6, there's a lot of rotation. So I think there's a lot of experiment in that phase. And that's when you're putting a lot of hard drive techniques, what I would say, the ability to receive, move and release the ball. You're putting all that together with the ability to play 1v1 and then maybe 1v1 with the option of the second player. So that takes away size and strength, because there's a 2v1 element. So I think that's important. I like to coach football in a way that you don't coach sort of mini soccer. You don't coach this small-sided soccer. You coach the game, the things that are going to happen in the big game. So little scenarios or positional scenarios, so like a winger v fullback or 3v3 in midfield and someone bringing the ball forward to create an overload. So I'm less worried about positions, is probably where I'm going. I'm more worried about transferable skills. I also think each player is unique, and each boy or girl is unique, and you need to understand why they play, what's their passion for playing, and really focus their development around that. I think orientation is very important. So I think some players are very good when they're facing the game. Some are quite good on the side, and others in the middle. Not so many are good in the middle. And so having some experience of playing in them different situations or receiving under pressure in them different scenarios is really important. I think as you go through the ages, I think, again, what you're naturally good at will steer you towards a certain area of the pitch. But I really would emphasise transferable skills rather than positions. And I think, and as I say, there's no one word or right answer for this. I think each boy or each girl is very unique, and there's no benefit in playing someone at the back who doesn't necessarily want to play there at the moment. Their mind might change over time, but I wouldn't force it upon a child for certain. Pajero he came to England. He'd been retired about 5 or 6 months. He came to England, was meeting all different coaches and stuff. And someone that was with him, said, go and visit Mike. And he come and spent a day. And we had a day just talking about football, really. We only had a short session because it was the day before a match with Liverpool under 23s, and we shared ideas. And at the end, he said to me, like, what's your dream, Mick? When you're going to be a manager? And I said, well, look, I want to be a head of youth or a manager outside the UK. And that's where I see my destiny. But at the moment, I'm very happy at Liverpool. And then probably about a month to 5 weeks later, he called me out of the blue and said, like, would I go across? And I originally went across to say no, look around and to say no. But once I got there and looked, I just thought I would regret it for the rest of my life. It's really hard for me to express in words how amazing that was for a young British coach to go across and work there. You know, the club that I went to work for is huge. It's the Man United or Liverpool of South America. The Morumbi Stadium is the second largest in Brazil outside the Maracanã. They also have an academy called Cotia, which is, it's had a wealth of top professionals come through. The latest one is Eder Militao, who we gave a debut to and went to Porto and now at Real Madrid. But down the years, it's like a who's who of football players that have come through, players like Kaká and stuff like this. So it was fantastic in terms of the club that I went to work for. The experience of living and traveling around Brazil and learning their culture about football, again, was an experience that very few will have, and I feel really privileged to have. There was issues with the language, of course, and you're coaching international players from Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, Ecuador, Peru. So there's a mix of cultures within that. The weather was very good, so the training time was completely different to maybe the UK when we have the wind and rain, so it was a lot calmer. And I loved the whole experience. My first game was against River Plate in Tampa Bay, so you're at Sao Paulo against River Plate, a month after leaving Liverpool's under-23s coach. So that was just a bit of a surreal situation. I love that. And we've had the big games against Palmeiras, Corinthians. But my personal highlight was we played Santos away at the stadium where Pelé had played in his career. And we won 3-1. And it was the first time Sao Paulo had beaten Santos in the derby in 7 years. And that was a fantastic experience. And just my whole time in Brazil, it was only 8 months, but I learned so much. And it's took me on probably 50% in my coaching. It was a fantastic experience for me. A lot of the stuff that happened in Brazil, it fueled and confirmed my faults, the stuff that I was doing before. You know, my language skills obviously have improved, and now I can coach in a second language, which I think is really, really important for a lot of players. There's a lot of things about culture that I was searching for answers for. Because I've worked at Chelsea and Liverpool, I'd worked with a lot of European players. And so to have the chance to go to South America and see how they viewed the game was really interesting. And then you have the contrast of how Brazilians see it and Argentinians see the game as well, and the different nations. So I think it's really opened my mind to culture, and coming back to the UK and working with a multinational squad now at Rangers, it's really helped me to see the game in the eyes of the players. One aspect that was really important that I brought back for youth coaches, because I was emailing a lot of my friends in England and texting to share ideas, was this thing about playfulness and rehearsal. You know, and we have this saying like play, you know, train how you play. And I think that's relevant when you want to work on certain things where you want the right intensity to recreate the game. But I think there's another part of coaching, which is a real skill and an art of standing back from players and allowing them to rehearse and be playful in their football. And the Brazilian players or the South American players I work with, I saw that in abundance. In terms of like you have to give them breathing space to go and practice some of the things that they want to develop in their game, whether it's the way they kick a dead ball or the 1v1 skills that they use. There's an element of standing back and giving time in your practice for that to take place. So as a youth coach coming home, I wanted to really emphasise that within the academy football, specifically at Liverpool, to say that young kids now are only playing when we are overseeing them play. So when do they go and create these fantastic skills we see in the World Cup, in the Champions League, European Championships, in the Premier League? So we need to give them an opportunity to rehearse a little bit, you know, without us overseeing everything, and bring a little bit of street football back into our training. So that's something that I've introduced for young players, and obviously the culture thing and the language skills for working with first teamers. Now, this is interesting because I had the big disappointment of not making it as a player, you know, to the level that I wanted to. So when I started coaching at 21, I did have a plan, and it sounded crazy at the time, and it's still a bit crazy now. But Bobby Robson was my idol, and he was my idol for one reason, And that was because I loved his personality, but also the biggest reason was that he'd gone and coached Barcelona, Porto, PSV, and Sporting Lisbon. And he was a British coach that was working outside, learning a second language. And I've always been fascinated by foreign football. I've always been fascinated by Johan Cruyff and Holland. I've always been fascinated by Serie A because of the Gazzetta program at the weekends when I was growing up. And I'm just fascinated about the way different cultures see the game. So that's been my driver since I was 21. And I said by the time I was 40, I wanted to be a manager or a head of youth or a youth coach outside of the UK. And that was my real dream. And that's helped me really, because I found it really hard to leave Chelsea for Liverpool and then Liverpool for Sao Paulo. But I did it because of these challenges that I'd set myself at 21, to keep pushing on to try and achieve that. Now, I'm nowhere near Sir Bobby, but he has been the person that's has been the guiding light for me. And I read a lot about Johan Cruyff. I think he's the most important person in the history of football. And I really love a lot of the things that I read and see, and I look for old interviews from him and players that have worked under him as well. And I just think he is the most important person in football. So they're sort of mentors. I think also when you coach young players, certain young players show you a level that you thought, oh, okay, at 14, that's a level I've not seen before. And that opens your eyes, and going away and study visits and going to see foreign clubs and going and playing in tournaments when I was at Chelsea against Barcelona or Liverpool against Real Madrid or Ajax or PSV, that takes you again to another level. It also gives you a realization that you're maybe on the right tracks and the players that you're coaching are actually very good and better than the people in England probably perceive. And that's been pleasing because a lot of young players are now doing well, and they're as good as foreign players. But there was a time where we sort of were overcritical, and I'm still driven by that, the opportunity to go and work abroad again in the future. The Brazilian experience is only opened up more energy to go and do that again. Well, that was a big difference, and I speak about this quite a lot. When you live in London, it's a very diverse community, and also you have different periods of recruitment, but just purely because of the amount of people that live in London and when they come into football. So you get the recruitment at under 9s into your academy, and then you'll get another one when they go secondary school, because there's a lot of single parent families or people within central London where they can't take their kids out to grassroots football at 6 or 7. So therefore, them kids don't come into football till 12 or 13. So you get them in the secondary school. And then there's a conveyor belt of people just move into London. So therefore, there's all these opportunities for development and recruitment. And as I say, there's a wide diversity anyway, which you start off with. That was completely different when I went to Liverpool. Less people go to live in Liverpool, and the people in the Northwest are more of one type, and there's less diversity in the community. So I think you can be an under 14s coach, for example, at Chelsea, and you can have similarities with under 14s coach at Liverpool, but it's a really different job. And I do feel you have to be a lot more patient in the North, and you have to be very consistent in your coaching beliefs, and you have to really stay with the players a little bit more than in the South. And we're only talking, small percentages here, but in the North, you don't get the conveyor belt of players at under 12, for example, and if you don't get the players at under 9 in the program, it's very, very hard then to go and recruit from outside. So it's a really interesting concept between the boys from the North and the South. At Chelsea, we never had a policy where players went to the changing room. They'd come and meet you on the pitch. So some boys would get there early and would be practicing and would have 300 or 400 touches before the training started. And when I went to Liverpool, it was different. We used to meet the players in the changing room. They used to all come round and shake your hand before we went to train. And it was one of the things that we actually removed from Liverpool in terms of waiting in the change room. We wanted the kids to meet you on the pitch, so they got this extra contact time. And so the cultures between the two clubs are great. They were fantastic in different ways in their beliefs. And I learned so much from Liverpool after the 9 years at Chelsea. And it was just what I was looking for. When people say the grass is not greener, well, I was probably looking for a grass that was cut slightly differently. And that's how I like to think in my head about the move between the two clubs. And but both clubs have been fantastic. I have to say, both academy managers, Neil Bath does a wonderful job at Chelsea. I learned so much. And then Alex Inglethorpe, who's a bit like my football brother, he took me to the next level again in our friendship and the way that we debate and chew the fat around football. You know, it's fascinating. I think both clubs do a fantastic job. In terms of the day-to-day training, I don't think there's much difference. It's obviously the demands that you place on older players and the intensity you train at, but I still think it's football. I think you have to understand that the players come to you and they really want to play football, so you shouldn't veer too far away from the game, you know. And it's really that when young kids get out of their mum and dad's car and they run to the pitch to start training, if after 15 minutes they don't have the same energy, that's definitely you as the adult that's got it wrong. But it's very much the same day in, day out for a professional senior football player. They're training every day at 10 or 10:30, and how you meet them with your personality and the practices that you select for them and how personal them practices are to them and their development is really, really important. And the one thing I would say to coaches who might make the same step that I've made the last couple of years is when you're working in an academy and you have a relationship with a young player, there's always an element of doubt in their mind. That if you say, come on, you need to work on X, Y, and Z, this might going to stop you foul, or that's going to stop you from getting there, or you need to improve your strength to a super strength. In the back of their mind, whether they agree or disagree, there's that moment of doubt where they think, well, I haven't made it yet. So maybe Mick's right, or maybe so-and-so's right. When you're working in the first team and the players are millionaires and they've earned, you know, they've got the car and they've got the lovely house and the family and they have the status, now it comes down to their drive and ambition. So now you're making a suggestion to a player that's a very established player, maybe an international. It's a suggestion. So it's a different type of relationship. You know, they won't jump at the same height as maybe some of the pre-first team debut players are. And then there's a group that obviously of players who have just made their debut, and how do you keep that look in their eye? How do you keep that motivation there? And how do you keep that drive in them to go and achieve more? You know, and the unique one that I see with that is Trent Alexander. I think he still has the look in his eye that he had when he was leaving the 18s to come to me in the 23s and then to the first team. He had real, the first team debut was the start, and he had a number of targets he set himself to reach after that. And it's only recently he played his 100th game for Liverpool at 21. And I smile when I see things like that, because I know he'll be ticking these things off, and that's his driver. And I think that's it. You really are working with senior players now, and you're throwing options to them or a suggestion to them, and you'll really see the drive of the individual players. And I see that every day with, you know, Gary McAllister and Steven Gerrard, who I work with. I see their obsession to get better. I still see them going to the gym every day now. That's their drive. You know, and I'm fascinated about how you can give that to people, or why some people have it and maybe others don't. It's been fantastic getting to know Steven. He's got real high standards as a human being, and the way that he carries himself every day. He's got fantastic self-discipline, and I think he really pushes that across to his players. He communicates fantastically well with both staff and the group. I think he also deals with the media very well. So he shows a lot of qualities that a modern manager needs to show. He shows real faith in his staff, but with faith becomes responsibility. So, you know, he's brought in a team with him, and I think he's selected very, very well. You know, he's brought Gary McAllister and myself, Tom Coleshaw from Liverpool, Jordan Milson as head of performance, Scott Mason as analyst. So he brought people around to really round off his own skills and to try and help him put his vision in. He has a real clean eye for recruitment and the type of young player that he wants to work with. So he spends a lot of time with them players on a one-to-one basis, talking and understanding them. And I think that's really, really important. And there's a real push within the club that people won't see from outside to put some real strong structures in place, you know, around the building, around the stadium, the links with the academy. Ross Wilson coming in as sporting director has really helped that as well, pull all that together. But it's a pleasure for me on a day-to-day basis, because I'm learning as a football coach as one thing, but I also am obsessed with learning about, you know, the top players and why they stayed at the level they were for a long period of time. So some of the conversations I have with Steven and Gary around that I find really interesting. And as I say, he gives me a hell of a lot of responsibility on a daily basis to plan sessions, to put his vision into the team, and I'm really thankful for that. It's a fantastic club, And we've had some really, really big nights in the first 18 months. You know, some of the Old Firm games and some of the games in Europe have been fantastic. And there's probably too many to mention, you know, now. So that shows that there's been a marked improvement in the work that we've done. If you want to get the insight into a player, I think Dennis Bergkamp's book, if I had to say one book, his book, Stillness and Speed, and from a player's perspective, is fantastic. From a manager's perspective, one of my favourites, Carlo Ancelotti, he's one of my favourites because he's moved around to big clubs and learnt a second language, a lot of the things I would love to do. But he has a book called Quiet Leadership that's just on relationships, and I love that book. If you want an insight into the season and how someone might manage the tactics, I think Pep Guardiola's book, Pep Confidential, his first year at Bayern Munich, was fascinating. A book that most people won't know about, if you want to read about just coaching in general of young people, then The Carolina Way, which is Dean Smith, who was the UNC basketball coach for many years, and Michael Jordan, I find that fascinating. The big famous Dutch coach Rinus Michels has got a book called Team Building, and that's a really good book. But the ultimate team building book for me is one that's in another sport, and that's Legacy, about the All Blacks. So there's probably 5 or 6 recommendations there. I've got a few more getting dust in my home office, which I need to find the time to read. But I find it fascinating to read other coaches and famous players and the journey that they went on, and just taking little snippets from it to work with my players. I think that's it's really important. I think you've got to stay close to the game. Why do they play it? I think you've got to really emphasize to the young player it's about them. It's about people, and it's not about systems, what you're doing. I think you have to manage their pathway. I think young players now, in my experience, they fall into a black hole if they don't believe in their pathway. So if they haven't made it to the first team at 18 or 19, but in all the years that I've been coaching, only one player sort of like took the lift straight from 16s, 18s, 23s first team, and that's Trent Alexander. And a lot of other famous players now and other really top players that haven't made it, they've had to sort of take the stairs, which is a lot of loans. And that might be a Loftus-Cheek or a Mason Mount or a Tammy Abraham or a Harry Wilson now from Liverpool. They're having to take a slightly different route. And Harry Kane and players like that have done that, obviously more famous cases. So I think what you have to help the players understand is their pathway, what it's took the players in their first team at their club to get where they are, and how many players in their first team were ready to play for that club at 18 or 19. And I think that's a really interesting thing to do with a player. And then I think it's like 4 or 5 things. The first thing is like, what's your self-awareness? So when you're watching yourself at your best, what is it that you do? What is it that people say about you? What is it that the coaches say? What is it that you're feeling? Well, that is your awareness of you at your best. So that's number 1. Then number 2 is, what do you do about that every day then? So what are your daily rituals? How do you make your strengths a super strength? What areas might you fail in? What areas do you need to manage, maintain? What areas do you need to improve? The third thing is, how does that fit inside the team? So you have these 2 very personal things of your, developing your playing personality or identity. But the third thing is, how does that fit inside a team? And how do you become selectable? And how do you play with different teammates? Who's serving you? Who are you serving? And if you're serving a centre forward as a wide player and that changes to another centre forward, how do you change and adapt? So the last one is your relationship management. And this is where I think a lot of young players are struggling. How are you perceived, and how do you perceive other people? And how do you communicate with the staff? Would your teammates pick you? What do the people around the building think of you? The car you drive, the clothes you wear, how you manage social media, I think is really, really important now, because CEOs are on it. The fans get a perspective of you. So there's a real thing about, social media can be so positive, but it has to be managed in the right way. Another big thing is your support network. So how many people do you allow in to give you advice? And does that support network manage your mindset well, or do you manage that support network? And I think that's really, really important. And in my experience, the best young players manage their support network. They keep it very tight and they manage it very well. So whether that's their representative or their agent, and You know, it might be a girlfriend's family, parents, all these people at the club in it, the more difficult it becomes. So I think if you control them things, who are you, where you're going, what you're doing every day, how does it fit, manage relationships, then what I've done there is give clarity to the word ownership. And I see bandied around so much with young players about, oh, take ownership. But we don't really articulate it as coaches in a simple way. And I think that's a nice way of doing it. And that's the journey I like to go on with all the players. And therefore, when you're managing a squad of 26 or 27, it's impossible for just you to do that. So you have to spread around your staff and have unit staff, and they might have to go off and have an informal conversation here or there. And that's why I say the first contact's really important. But I think for young people, they have to understand that you're working with people, not systems. And so when people ask about what formation this, well, it depends what player you've got. And you've really got to put some structures in place that allow young players to express themselves and feel that this team's about them. And then I feel you'll get the best out of them. And I think then as a coach, you'll reap the benefits of that later on. And I can't emphasize that enough, that the relationship that you have with your players and your staff is paramount to getting your ideas across and to seeing young people develop.